Hi everyone, today is Wednesday, February 8th, 2017. My name is Brian McEnany. I'm the hydrologist here with the National Weather Service. This is the February water supply forecast and it's the long version. So let's get to it. So as of yesterday, this is the current weather pattern that we just finished up, and this is what we saw. And this is a rendition of the winds at about 11,500 feet. And you can see the flow as it's coming across here is wide open. Here's Hawaii, here's the coast, and here's Baja. The flow was coming in, it was a direct westerly flow, and it put down all sorts of moisture. It was quite warm. Snow levels were about 6,500 feet. But something to note is this feature right here is a high pressure. It's been a minor part of the big weather picture this year because it's down by Baja, the door is open, and this is the weather scenario for the most part that we've seen through December and January. So let's take a look at the precip anomaly as a result of that weather pattern, and other patterns very similar to it for the 2-month period. And when you look at December, what we're looking at is the entire Colorado basin, and areas of blue and purple indicate above normal precip significantly, 150 to 200% for the blue, 2 to 300% for the purple. And you look at this and you can say, okay, well that's great, but snow's falling out in the desert where we're not going to see it in the spring snowmelt runoff. Let's take a look at just the headwater areas in the mountains, and this is what we see. Again, you see blues and purples, especially the purples on the south aspect of the Uinta Mountains, which indicate 2 to 300% precip, and really parts of southern Utah. We also see that 2 to 300% precip in December. So we started off really quite well. Then we moved into January, and what we see is a great deal of Utah and areas around it showing 2 to 300% precip. When you look in the headwater areas, again, we were 2 to 3 times the normal amounts in December, in January, and this was great. When you look at the temperatures, and this is important, are we melting snow early like we've seen in these past 5 years? And what we see are the cooler colors indicate, or the green and blue tones indicate cooler colors. And Utah for December was roughly around, maybe 3 degrees, 5 degrees cooler than the 30-year average from 81 to 2010. And that's important because we're not getting it as rain, we're getting it as snow. When you look at January, more of the same. The western U.S. is cool, the eastern U.S. is warm. This was flip-flop really for the past 5 years. What we saw was western U.S. was dry, was warm, and this year that hasn't been the case due to that high pressure being much smaller down by Baja and allowing that door to open up for all the storms that have come through. When we look at the snowpack as of yesterday, and how I'm going to do this is an average by basin. The y-axis is the snow water equivalent, or the water in the snowpack. The x-axis is time starting on October 1st when the water year starts. The kind of the firmer blue line is the average. 2005 is the teal line, 2011 is the red line, and these are the two biggest years that we've seen since we've been doing this automated snow sampling by the NRCS. And what you see for the Bear River drainage is 163% of median, and it's above 2005 and it's above 2011 at this point, which is great. We'll take it. The Weber River, 167% of median, and it's above both of those years. When you look at Six Creeks, which are the mountains just east of Salt Lake County, 154%. When you look at Utah Lake drainage, 181% of median. When you look at the Duchesne River Group, 191%. When you slide up into the upper Green, mostly into Wyoming, 161%. Lake Powell, this is the Colorado area that feeds into Lake Powell, 140%. The Sevier River, 149. And the Virgin at twice the amount. But you can see, not even close to 2005. But if 2005, this was the scenario that we had houses falling into rivers down in there on the Santa Clara Basin. 27 homes went into the river due to flooding and phenomenal amounts of precip. So hopefully we don't go that big. But it's nice to see that we're above 2011 at this point. So now let's take a look at water supply. And these forecasts are made by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, which is part of the National Weather Service, and we're also in the same room together as the Weather Forecast Center. And we'll start with a couple of points in the Bear River drainage. And we'll look at Woodruff Reservoir, and that is expected to produce 146% of average volume flow from April 1st through the end of July. And you can see this forecast. The range is the blue area. The lighter blue is in the middle. The red square in the middle is the 50th percentile. You drop down, that's the 75th percentile, and you drop down farther on that red line, that's 90th percentile. So the River Forecast Center gives you a range of possibilities. And the reason why they do this is we can only forecast weather 7 days out. Beyond that, we don't know how the weather's going to shape the hydrology and the runoff. But you can see the first forecast that was made in January was close to average, and now after that phenomenal January with 200 to 300% precip, that forecast is bumped up, and this area, the Bear River near Woodruff Narrows, is expected to produce 146% of average at the 50th percentile. When you look at the Bear River near Stewart Dam, near the town of Montpelier, 225% of average. When we slide down into the Weber, this is what we see. And we're going to look at 3 points here. We're going to start with the headwaters in Oakley at 129% of average, and that forecast has just been going up. That blue line in the middle that we see on the graph is the actual ESP model that is trending upward as a result of all that phenomenal precip. We'll see how this continues. Inflow into East Canyon Reservoir at 137% of average. Into Pineview Reservoir, 204% of average is the forecast. And it even has an outside chance of seeing the max inflow we saw in 1984. I mean, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves because we have a lot of winter left, but you can see how twice the amount of inflow into this area. Six Creeks, this are the mountains and the drainages to the east of Salt Lake County. Little Cottonwood at 126% of average, up significantly. City Creek is at 103% of average. Now what we're going to do is slide down into Utah Lake, and what we'll look at are a couple of points there. The headwaters up near Woodland on the Provo River at 148% of average expected this spring. And then Spanish Fork near Castilla at 139% of average. Now what we'll do is we'll slide over to the Duchesne and a few other points downstream from the Duchesne near the Price. We'll start with Strawberry at Soldier Springs, and we're at 141% of average, 1 million acre feet. Duchesne at Taviona at 145% of average at 157,000 acre feet. West Fork at Duchesne near Vat Diversion, 161% of average at 30,000 acre feet. And then we'll slide down on the Price for Schofield Reservoir, inflow at 154% of average. And then Joe's Valley Reservoir on Sealy Creek at 134% of average. We'll move up to the Upper Green, and we'll look at 2 points, and we'll look at the Lower Green. We'll start with Flaming Gorge Reservoir at 168% of average, and then going downstream to the Green River on the Green River at 4 million acre feet roughly at 138% of average. And then we'll move down and a little bit east coming from the Lake Powell, and we'll hit the point at Cisco as it comes into Utah along the Colorado River, and that's 124% of average, 5.5 million acre feet. And then 134% of average for Lake Powell inflow into Glen Canyon Dam, and that's 9.6 million acre feet. So very good to see going into Lake Powell. Now what we'll do is slide over to the Sevier, and as the Sevier flows from south to north, we'll look at the headwater area at Hatch, 104% of average at 50,000 acre feet, again trending upward, and 112% of average for Marysville at Paiute Reservoir at 73,000 acre feet. The last basin we'll look at here is the Virgin, And we'll look at the headwater areas of the Virgin, near the Virgin, at 121% of average, or 70,000 acre feet. And then the outflow as it moves out of Utah at Littlefield, 106% of average at 69,000 acre feet. And it's nice to see the Virgin doing much better. This had near record lows last year and some of the other 5 years that we were quite dry. So as a result of what we're looking at, all this precip, all these cooler temperatures, the U.S. Drought Monitor looks at drought in the West and the U.S. But for our purposes, we're looking at the West. And what you see is greatly improved, especially when you look at Utah. We're only at D0, abnormally dry for parts of the West Desert. California, I think, is the one that really stands out, as only a very small part is D3, and it's been quite a long time that they haven't been in D4, and this all happened in 1 year, which is pretty wild. But the question is, how much did everything improve in the last year? And this is what we see. California had the greatest improvement, and Utah, you can see, we've improved also. Parts of the rest of the country, not so much, but the western U.S., with the exception of maybe far eastern Arizona, improved dramatically. So all in all, the hydrology of Utah as of early February is looking quite promising. Now the question is, are we going to flood when you see these amounts? And that's something that I think we're watching quite closely, but we still have 2 more months of snow collection, and then we need to see how the spring shakes out. So something to consider. If you need any more info, and if you need any more data, or if I can help you in any way, there's my phone number. That's a cell that's in my pocket. There's my email. Contact me at any time. Until the next one in March, that's the long version, and I do appreciate taking the time to listen to this. Until then, we'll talk to you again. Thank you.